Hey everyone, welcome back to the Not Just Politics podcast. The following is a Bridge USA style discussion with Addison Deal, Matt Foxall, Pat Sullivan, and Trevor Fitzsimmons. We sat down to discuss American intervention globally, gun rights regulations, and climate change. I hope you enjoy. All right, we'll get started. I'm going to lay out a couple of ground rules before we get started. Since this is a Bridge USA discussion, I'm gonna lay out the four sort of rules that they use in all of their events. I ask that everyone sticks them. I think they're pretty easy. First, no side conversations. The headphones are going to help with that. You will hear everyone talking on top of each other, and it's very jarring. So that's going to happen a bit, but let's try to keep it to a minimum. Second, we are allowed to go after people's ideas. You do not attack anybody's character. I don't think that'll be a problem here, but I got to throw that out there. Third, please listen to listen, not to respond. Listen as actively as you can. And then fourth, we do not expect any person in this room to represent any group with which they identify. You are here to represent you, and that is all. My rules, again, the side conversations is also a thing that I have. Please try not to do that. I don't think that'll be a problem. And then I will not give any of my opinions unless you ask me to. I will try to stay out of this as much as possible. I have brought questions on each of these topics from Bridge USA. I brought some of my own. With that being said, we'll get started. Our three topics today are American intervention, gun rights, and climate change. Any vote on which one gets discussed first?
No, I don't think it really matters to me.
Okay. Then we will start with American intervention. Oops. Okay. What is America's role? And also, as another quick thing, we'll do raising hands to talk. I will pick on people as we go along, and we'll try to get back and forths going as much as we can. What is America's role on the world stage? What should America be? Pat.
All right. Historically, ever since after a little bit after World War I, but mainly after World War II, the U.S. came into the world as a great power, and they've acted as essentially the world's police force in really any point of the world, whether it's military intervention, political, or economic intervention. Is the best way to put that broadly. Mm-hmm. Like I said, they came to mainly after World War II with the invention of nuclear weapons. And there was a power vacuum. I mean, Europe was decimated. Mm-hmm. Germany was practically in shambles, so were the Brits and the French. And there was a lot of turmoil in other regions of the world while the British and French were trying to sort of cut up their colonial empires in, Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. Parts of South and Central America, where they also had claims, and where we had claims, we were trying to get rid of that. A lot of people, there's a big call for anti-imperialism after World War II. And ever since then, we sort of stepped in to fill the void where a lot of those other countries were pulling out and sort of failed in a lot of regions where they were involved. And, after World War II, it was the Cold War, the rise of communism. Mm. So we saw the growing threat that the Soviet Union and the USSR held, and we tried to prevent the spread of communism. And we sort of went into these countries that were becoming free and set up stable democracies.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, first of all, does anyone have any other opinions?
I just want to add one
Sure.
more thing. I definitely agree. I think, the U.S. has taken the role of kind of like the world's police in a lot of things, but I think it's also important to note that there is, motivation behind that. It's not exactly just the U.S. looking to, be the police for other countries. There is, invested interest a lot of the times whenever the U.S. is intervening, whether it's resources or, just looking good, that kind of stuff. There is, a vested interest for the U.S.
Yes. The Iraq War would be an example of that.
Yeah. Even just our involvement in Afghanistan.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, she made a good point. And building on top of that, there's, strategic value in being in a lot of these places. Like Afghanistan. HKIA, the airport where we were, that we pulled out of, that was the largest air base that we had in the region. That was the largest base that we had that close to China. So like a lot of these places, there are like economic and resource reasons why we're in these regions, but there's also military reasons. Because acting as the world's police force, it's tough when you have to, if there is some sort of like civil war breaking out in Yemen, and our closest air base is, I don't know, Tampa Bay, like that's tough. Like it's hard to get from Tampa to Africa really quick. So it helps having these bases in other areas of the world, and then it helps boost local economies, and we pay these countries to build bases and build naval stations and stuff like that in those bases or in those countries.
Matt, Trevor, any thoughts?
I would say that I agree with on the 2 points. The United States always has a realist ideology towards international relations, meaning that whenever they act as a unitary actor, they do such in a way that they try and benefit themselves. Like it might help another country to build a military base, but they're doing that so that we can build a military base for our military. So it's all about, in my opinion, vested interest in the realist perspective of the United States.
Okay, so Matt.
I don't have much to add to the whole topic with like America being the world police. I just don't think that they should be the world police.
Okay, that's my follow-up, because we've sort of all maybe agreed on the fact that this is the reality. America has acted as the world police force since maybe the end of World War II, beginning of the Cold War. There is an American world order that was established at that point. Should we have done that, and should we continue to do it? Eddie.
I can say there are times where I do believe we should intervene. There's a certain point, we have a history of kind of when it's on our doorstep, stepping in once it's breaking down our doors. But I think a lot of what we do, at least in recent times, getting involved, I feel at the drop of a hat. I think the U.S. definitely, if there's no vested interest for the U.S. or it's not in the best interest of the people of that country, or if it's honestly, a lot of times it's a matter that the country is solving on its own, that the U.S. just, kind of steps in. I think we definitely need to pull back our involvement, at least a good bit. I don't think we should be the world's police, at the very least.
Okay. Pat?
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think that the U.S. does tend to get more involved once it sort of threatens us. Like, prime example would be attacks on 9/11. We were involved in the Middle East. We have been since the early Cold War. I mean, we funded the Mujahideen when the Soviets invaded, and then that's a whole other story. But we were actively trying to stop the growth and spread of Al Qaeda in the Middle East and Africa. So we were involved in all these places. And obviously involvement grew once the towers were hit and the Pentagon. But I think it's tough when you're talking about like, should we be somewhere, should we not be somewhere? Because there's a great sway in the American public when it comes to this stuff. Like, it was really heavy after events like 9/11 or Pearl Harbor or something like that. We're like, oh no, like we need to be involved, like we need to be there. And then after a couple years, people are like, we shouldn't be here. The same thing happened in Vietnam. Like Vietnam, very high public support at the start of the war. Around 3 to 4 years into the war, the anti-war movement started, and no one really wanted to be in the country. And that's military advisors always say that it's 3 years with the American public. If you can't solve whatever military problem we're facing in 3 years, the public is going to sort of look away from it. I mean, look at where we're involved now. We have a lot of resources, a lot of money being sent to Ukraine. Now Israel's starting to build up. So we're sending, I mean, we've already sent a carrier strike group to the Mediterranean. There's JSOC forces on the ground. And there's Marines preparing to deploy to Gaza. So it's tough thinking if we should or shouldn't be somewhere. I don't know. It's as much as we would like to be the good guys, you know, it's tough because there's the biggest problem we're involved in right now is Ukraine. As simple as that. And a lot of people are very, you know, we need to help the Ukrainians. We need to prevent the spread of, you know, Russian control in the region. And, you know, we should send money. We should send support. But then again, in turn, that all that money we're sending, I feel could be invested in other places. You know, like we're sending, I don't know how much we've sent, billions and billions of dollars.
I've never found an official number, but I think it's over the tens.
It grows.
It's over 10
It
billion,
grows.
I think.
It grows daily. I mean, what they have sent is a fraction of the U.S. defense budget. Like, it is like this much compared to how much
it's tiny.
It's tiny. But it's in regular people money, it's a lot. But in U.S. government money, it's not a lot. But not just money. Like, we sent Abrams, we've sent, you know, Humvees, night vision, all that stuff, weapons, munitions. And
Okay. Then do you think, so I guess then we'll open up the Ukraine discussion.
yeah.
When do we stop sending, do we ever stop sending aid, and when? Matt?
I feel like we should have stopped sending aid to Ukraine a while ago because it's just it's basically none of our business because we are it's not our role as Americans to be the world police, I don't think, at all. So and being the world's police, even if we were, that would be, we take too many sides, I feel like, you know, like we're not,
What do you mean by that?
we're not objective enough. Like, we always go straight for like sending military equipment to like these places instead of sending ambassadors to like try and get peace negotiations going.
Addie?
Sorry. I think just to add on to that, we're sending all this aid and everything, and we're, you know, when countries are facing some kind of turmoil and we do jump in as the police and we do help them, there's cases where once we help them for so long and nothing happens and we pull out and then they're completely screwed over. They have no resources, they have nothing to keep them going, and that's something we've seen. So I think I can't speak obviously for all of the governing bodies, but, you know, there might be the right idea in mind. You know, we might be trying to help people, but I think at the end of the day, our attempting to help oftentimes does a lot more worse than it does good. And I definitely agree. I think staying in our lane and kind of staying out of other countries' business a lot of the time can do more good than we think it can.
Pat?
Yeah, I think, prime example, like you said, like we'll go in and, you know, we'll get involved and then 9 times out of 10 it becomes worse. Good example of that is Afghanistan.
Yep.
I mean, we did a lot of good in Afghanistan. I know I have a lot of friends who were in Afghanistan, in Iraq, all through those wars. I grew up with a lot of people. I know people. And it was unfortunate the way that we left there. And I feel like that could have been done better, and it could have, because we just kind of pulled the carpet out of Afghani's feet. Like that was a disaster.
It wasn't a clean pull either.
No,
a couple of cups fell.
Yeah.
Something's on the floor.
If
It's
it was
broken.
like a stack of cups, like the bottom 5 cups fell, and then everything else came down with
Yeah.
it. Like, it should have been a much more gradual pullout.
Yeah.
And it was. Like, we've been pulling out of there since, like, I don't know, probably like 2016. But it's been gradual. Like, we didn't have the manpower on the ground to sustain a full pullout like that. But to the other points where it's, I like what you guys said, how we should stay out of it. You know, stay out, let countries deal with it themselves. And I think that a lot of times that works, you know, because there are a lot of times that we have gotten involved in history and in the world, and it's just made things worse. But I think in the case of Ukraine, I think it would have been a bad idea if we didn't get involved.
Okay.
Because we didn't get involved when Putin annexed Crimea, and he saw that as untouched. Like he knew that he would, if he in his mind, no one tried to stop him. So he's like, I'm just going to keep going,
Sure.
right? And that's the same thing that happened with Hitler in the 1930s. Is he started grabbing places in Eastern Europe, and no one was stopping him. And eventually, he had expanded nearly twice the size of Germany with these, and that's tough because we don't really. Me personally, I don't want to see another Hitler or another country at the point of Germany in 1942. And I think that it's for the best that we are in Ukraine. I think that other countries should give a little more than they are, and we shouldn't be giving like the brunt force of it. I mean, we already fund like 75% of NATO and the UN. Like we wrote the UN charter. So like the US is really the powerhouse in a lot of these things already, and I feel like a lot of other countries need to step up a little bit more, and it can't just be us all the time giving all of our resources because we don't have the military supplies to be giving away. Like we are very underfunded and very understaffed. Like military recruiting numbers are at an all-time low, and we're still like reserve units are still running with equipment from Cold War, early Iraq. You know, like we can't be giving away brand new M1 Abrams. Like the Germans are there, the Poles are right there, the Spanish. They all love to say, "Oh, the U.S. shouldn't do this," but they don't do anything. Like, in regards to Israel, Spanish. I don't know. There's someone in the Spanish government. I saw this yesterday. In their version of the Justice Department, was condemning the way that the U.S. is trying to assist Israel, and calling for the EU to block any trade or any work with any countries who support Israel. Spain's not doing anything in any region of the world.
Right.
So it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback for a lot of these countries when they don't really pick up their slack. And me personally, I think that Ukraine is a good cause because Putin and his administration are not great people. They've done nothing great ever, really.
Wrap it up, Pat. Sorry, we got to keep it flowing here.
Yeah. I think that we should be involved, but I feel like we should kind of cut it back and let other people kind of pick it up where we are carrying too much of the weight.
So how do we balance... how do we make sure that, because the discussions that I've had, people are concerned about Vladimir Putin pushing into NATO countries, particularly like Poland, like people are concerned with taking Poland. How do we figure out how to balance that between giving aid or maybe giving less or giving none? Like if we give none, how much are we risking Putin coming into a NATO country and starting a bigger conflict? Trevor.
I say we open up with diplomacy. Why do we have to? I don't understand why the American government feels that we need to go in with weapons first and then attempt diplomacy. I feel like both sides are at a stalemate right now within this war. Not much ground has been gained either way, from what I've seen. I honestly, a lot of people are thinking that Putin is a lot dumber than people think. He's very well educated. He knows, he calculates the risks of whether or not to go into Poland or not. And the risk of going into Poland, in my opinion, would be too great for Putin. Would he try and test NATO's response to maybe deploying weapons of mass destruction in Ukraine? Possibly. Ukraine's not a NATO country. People tend to forget about that. Ukraine's not part of NATO. That's why the state apparatus of the Russian Federation feels necessary to invade Ukraine to prevent their slow adaptation into NATO, as they feel is possibly going to happen. So I would overall say diplomacy is the best option here.
Should Ukraine, and I don't want to get us off topic, but should Ukraine be a part of NATO? Because from my understanding, that was never supposed to happen. But should we invite Ukraine into NATO? Maddie?
I think it's definitely complicated because even with just the conflict right now, we're not, technically involved because Ukraine is not a part of NATO, so we don't technically have to officially declare involvement. But I think the hardest part of this conversation is what Ukraine entering NATO would do to Putin and Russia and what he would do in retaliation of that, because where the effects of the Cold War are still long lasting past when it supposedly ended. But so basically anything we do is like Russia's eyes are on us. So us, sending aid to Ukraine and like being involved in that way is kind of us saying like, we're not okay with this, but like we're not trying to, start a bigger conflict like this. So I think bringing Ukraine into NATO would, of course, accelerate that conflict so much to where and I feel like honestly at this point Putin's almost asking for that to happen. He's almost begging the US to induct Ukraine into NATO because he wants that kind of bigger conflict. So I think it's a very fine line we have to walk on between like helping out Ukraine and actually like them becoming a part of NATO. Okay.
Anyone else? Pat?
I like the point that you made when you said the Cold War supposedly ended, because this is the Cold War all over again. Like we're fighting.
Yeah, we're kind of in a new one now. Like
Yeah,
with China, we're definitely in a new Cold War.
Even with Russia, I'd say. Like it's proxy wars. We're in a sort of another Cold War with North Korea, not really North Korea, but mainly Russia, Iran, and China.
Yeah, but we're in a position now where the United States is again trying to strengthen ties abroad in the South China Sea, in Japan, like those places, because China's like redrawing maps and they're just like taking stuff they're not supposed to take.
Yeah, we're fighting more proxy wars.
Yeah,
like Vietnam, like Afghanistan, and the Russians and the Iranians are doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Iran is funding Hezbollah, funding Hamas. There are a couple times in Iraq and Afghanistan that U.S. forces were attacked by Russian-backed militias or Wagner forces. But the question if Ukraine should be inducted into NATO, they've tried. They've been trying to go through this process for years now. And I think one of the big reasons that they haven't been inducted into NATO was just the level of corruption that is in that country.
Yeah.
Like the idea that like the Ukrainians are this not the Ukrainians, but the Ukrainian government is this like perfectly sound,
altruistic
underdogs. No.
Sure.
Ukraine, since the fall of the Soviet Union, since they became independent, they have a lot of skeletons in their closet. Especially Zelensky. That current administration has a lot of skeletons in their closet. A lot of the things that are going on right now in that war that don't really reach mainstream media would not help Western sort of support for that war. If I think Putin is taking advantage that they're not in NATO, because you look at a map, every other country but Ukraine that borders Russia is a NATO country.
Yep.
So he sees it as if he can take over Ukraine, he sort of has the point of the spear has stabbed into the heart of these NATO countries.
Yeah.
He now has a little bit further reach west than he originally did. Economically and militarily, I see no real reason for Ukraine to be in NATO. Strategically, yeah, like it makes sense because that's just then we've completed the wall between the West and Russia. Like now there's like a little gap there.
Yeah.
I don't know though. I don't know if we should let them into NATO or not. I feel like it'll probably happen with the outcome of this conflict. It's the more likely solution that I see. But I don't know what'll happen. I'm not quite sure, if I'm being honest.
And how is President Biden handling this? Anyone's thoughts? Pat again.
So he's doing. I mean, he sent a little bit more money than I would like to see sent, but he hasn't deployed American forces, which is good because we don't need that right now. We do not need American forces in a large scale ground conflict with another world power, especially another world power that has nukes.
Yeah, in a hot spot too.
Yeah.
There's the argument that if this was maybe, I guess, is there a question of if this is more of a direct conflict, is that more acceptable to send American troops? Whereas this is, Ukraine is, you could argue that Ukraine is also a proxy war.
Oh yeah,
That we are just funding
yeah.
Ukraine's military, and maybe we shouldn't send troops over there. There's an argument for that.
By definition, this is a proxy war. Like if American forces are not directly involved. Now, don't get me wrong, American assets are on the ground in Ukraine.
Yeah.
They have been since before the war even happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like military advisors, we probably had special operations units on the ground. Like Ukraine's been a hotbed for the last 10 years. But it just recently hit the news and Russia invaded. Like Russia has been fighting in Ukraine since like 2013. So, I think President Biden made a smart play not putting troops on the ground.
Okay. Anyone else? Men? Okay. There's an argument that floats around that if Trump was in office, this would not have happened. And then there's that CNN town hall. Trump says he'll end the war in one day. Do any of these arguments hold water? Trevor?
I don't think that would be the case. I don't think any American president or anyone elected president would end the war in one day. One, you can't end a war in one day. It's virtually, you can call a ceasefire, but you can't end the war. Two, he wouldn't be able to do it because there's too much money on the ground, too much assets. Putin was building up the Russian military to invade well before the invasion occurred. I believe in 2020 they were actually building up the military. So this was planned, strategic by the Russian Federation. So I believe either way, we'd still be in the same situation, just a different person in office.
So Trump had more of a, I don't know how to explain it, but he had that sense of like he was not taking any crap from anyone in that sort of sense. Pat?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of these arguments where it's, would it have happened if Trump was in office? I don't know. I think that world leaders were, I don't want to say scared, but they were a little uneasy when Trump was in office because they didn't know what he was going to do.
Yeah, there's like an unpredictability to him.
He wasn't like, I mean, Joe Biden's a career politician. Trump was not. So you can tell what a career politician is going to do, especially if you've been in politics for long enough.
Yeah.
But like none of these world leaders knew what they were going to, like, they didn't know what they would say that would may or may not set Trump off. And I feel like a lot of these, like Russia was already operating on thin ice. Like they were kind of teetering on the edge. They were like, they knew that the West was going to be involved no matter what they did, but they didn't, under the Trump administration, they didn't know how involved the West was going to be. If Trump was in office, I mean, he has that relationship with Putin. I wouldn't be surprised if he was able to sort of, I don't know if I would say end, but de-escalate the conflict in a big thing. I don't know, because Putin's very adamant about how bad he wants Ukraine. So I would be interested to see how that would play out. But I don't prevent it. I say there's a higher likelihood that Trump would have been able to prevent the conflict, but end it, I'm not sure. I would say de-escalate, not end.
Okay. Where do we sit in terms of the United States' responsibility in helping refugees? Have we done too much, too little? Trevor?
Well, I feel we've done too little, as opposed to some of the other Western countries that actually follow international law and accept asylum seekers. Any asylum seeker is a refugee, qualifies under the refugee, the Geneva Convention as a refugee I forget what the treaty is. The Treaty on the Status of Refugees, I believe it is, as a refugee. That would include the migrants at the southern border. I did not mean to bring them up, but I'm just saying that would include under refugee status. An overall broad view of refugees, however, I still believe we should take in more refugees. If we adhere more to international law and international standards, the United States uses its quote-unquote soft power or its prestige in the world of being a world power to lead by example and possibly influence the decisions of other nations. For example, Australia follows very closely to U.S. foreign policy.
Okay. Anyone else? Matt?
I feel like before we increase the amount of refugees we're taking in, I feel like we should fix the current America that we have. Like literally here in Pittsburgh, we have people on Grand Street living in tents. I feel like we should fix a lot of those problems before we let in even more people who are impoverished and,
So you're saying, oh, sorry, Addie. Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. I definitely think we do have a lot to work on in our own, country, things like that. But I do think we should be taking in more refugees because at the end of the day, we do have problems in our country, but we were, on the Statue of Liberty, bring us your poor and huddled masses. We are a country that is for people who are escaping whatever it is that they're escaping. Like, that's our foundation as our country. Like, we should be letting as many refugees as possible in because that's just, that's what we've always stood for. That's what we should continue to stand for. And at the end of the day, if you're coming from a war-torn country, anything is going to be better than that. Like, at least if you come to the U.S., there is somewhere for you to go where you don't have to worry about gunfire or bombings, coming down the street. So I think we definitely need to do a lot more for refugees.
You said as many as possible. So I can make the argument that the current number we're taking in is as many as we can take.
I mean, I think, we do have, you do have to take in consideration our resources, our, how much land we have, those kind of things. I think that is important. And I think maybe if we have reached our capacity of refugees, we should be working, our involvement with other countries. We should be working with other countries on getting those refugees to other countries, to safe places in other countries. I just think that helping refugees, no matter what that looks like, whether that's helping them into our country, helping them into other countries, I think that just should be a priority. And, if we have reached our max, if we have not, we don't have enough resources, whatever, to bring in more refugees, then we need to start looking for other ways to help these refugees.
Okay. Anybody else? Pat?
Yeah, I think you all make some good points on that. I think the U.S. should do more. And, I mean, like you said, with the southern border, we just Border Patrol in specific, like they don't have the resources to help these people that need it. Like I was listening to a podcast probably a month ago, and the guy that was on it was former Border Patrol agent. He did BORTAC, which is like their special operations thing, and he's like, we don't have the resources to help these people. He's like, we all want to, but we don't have the resources because DHS isn't giving them the funding. So. And then in turn, Border Patrol gets a lot of heat. Homeland gets a lot of heat for that stuff, but they don't have the resources. And Border Patrol is the highest suicide rate in federal law enforcement because the things that they see, they can't help these people because they don't have the money. Me personally, I mean, this country was founded on immigrants. Like quite frankly, like every person who built this country was not from here.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer in that. I think that, bring more people in because, more people means more ideas and more opportunities for everybody, and more people means more money. So I think that the process to, apply for visas and stuff needs to be streamlined a little more because it is way too freaking long for any of that. And even Afghanistan, like during that pullout, private citizens got more people out of Afghanistan than the U.S. government did.
Yeah, I believe that.
I
believe
there was Save Our Allies was the name of the organization, and it's a bunch of former U.S. Special Operations veterans. Some of the guys are like owners of Black Rifle Coffee, and they went in and they got a bunch of their Army, Navy, and Air Force buddies, and they chartered planes, and they raised a bunch of money, and they flew people from Afghanistan to Saudi Arabia. Statistically, they got more people out than the U.S. government, and that's sad. That's sad.
Yeah.
Like the U.S. military, they have C-130s, they have aircraft carriers, they have all this stuff, and they couldn't get people out. We left.
Yeah.
How many? We left interpreters. We left people we worked with. We left dogs.
We left a lot of guns that
Yeah.
Hamas picked up and is
And-
rolling
yeah.
through Israel with them
Yeah.
as we speak.
Because the Taliban is giving them to Hamas. You know?
Yeah.
The Taliban's rolling around with night vision. Night vision.
Yeah.
Those like 4 tubed ones are like $30,000 a piece.
Yeah.
We left that. We left, armored vehicles and stuff. Now, granted, it's cheaper to leave stuff than to bring it back, but that's not the point.
Are you meaning to tell me that one semester at Point Park that night vision goggles would have been cheaper?
Yeah.
That I could have just bought night
Oh,
vision?
dude,
I could have just bought
I
a
don't-
cool set of night vision goggles?
I don't think you want to know how much a lot of that stuff costs.
Is it? No, I have some idea, but
It's-
that's messed up.
Yeah. I mean,
I should have just bought the night vision
yeah,
goggles.
right? That's what I'm saying. We left dogs, like service dogs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what did the Taliban do? Executed them on the runway of Kabul airport. And the U.S. government did nothing. Yeah. Thumbs down, Taliban.
Okay, so then is there an argument then that we should take all these resources that are going to these places and put them into some sort of program that allows us to bring in more refugees?
Yeah. I think so. And if not, if the U.S. government needs help, which they have a very long history of not asking for help, which I feel like they should.
Yeah.
There are private entities that are really good at this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Prime example, Afghanistan. Save Our Allies.
Yeah.
Utilize these agencies. Get them on contracts and use them. Or
Yeah.
stop spending money on stupid shit and, start funding better ways to help people that need our help. It's very hypocritical saying that we're the world's police force, but we can't help the people that need us.
Yeah.
It's sad.
That's a good point.
It's sad. As much good as the U.S. does in the world, this is one of the things where they fail every time. And it's sad to see.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts on American interventionism? Are we ready to move on?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's open up the discussion to gun rights and regulation. How do I don't know exactly how I want to open this. How does everyone feel about the Second Amendment? We'll start real broad and we'll get specific as we go along. Addie?
I think the Second Amendment specifically at the time was needed. When we wrote it, that was something that, we needed to worry about a lot. And I do think that in today's time, I do think people do have the right to bear arms. I think, protection is important. People go hunting, things like that. I do think people have the right to bear arms. However, with the technological advancements that we've made from the point where it was written to today, it is a completely different ball game. Like, it's completely different weapons. Like, back when we wrote this, it was powdered muskets and things. It took 20 minutes to reload before you could shoot your next one. And now it's automatic weapons that can fire 100 rounds in 10 seconds. So I think, while I do think the right to bear arms that the Second Amendment states is, something that is still needed today, I do think it shouldn't be so broad anymore just to as people have the right to bear arms. I think we need to be more specific. We need to be more, specific, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Matt?
I think that the Second Amendment is great, and it allows us to have weaponry that we need in case the U.S. government becomes a fully authoritarian state.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else, Pat?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, like the point of the U.S. or the Second Amendment is to prevent, government overreach.
Mm-hmm.
And I like what you said. The original concept of it was great. I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. I understand people do not like the Second Amendment. I understand the arguments around that. And how do I want to say this? It's very hard to, you have the right to bear arms. Simple as that. But it's like some of the heavier weaponry is very hard to get. Very hard. Like you can't own a automatic rifle without crazy permits and licensing. Like I'm talking probably like 3 years worth of paperwork to get that stuff. But I think it's a good thing for both protection and it's fun to be able to go shoot guns. And I think it kind of sets us apart from a lot of different countries in the world, which is a nice little touch in there.
Okay. Trevor?
Yes. I agree that the Second Amendment was needed and to an extent is needed in our society. I support the amendment at its creation that, yes, Americans do have the right to bear arms. I grew up around guns. I've shot guns before with my dad and my brother. However, does a person really need an AR-15 or flamethrower, both of which you can buy legally in the United States? I feel like maybe there should be a limit on what types of... We can limit the First Amendment. Why can't we limit the Second?
Interesting. Well, that's another can of worms that we're not going to open. That was not voted on. But okay. Wait, is there somebody outside?
Yeah, it was Grace. She just walked by. She looked at me.
Oh. Okay. So it seems to be... So I guess maybe the discussion is... Because, Pat, I think, Pat, you made an interesting point. Like, these weapons, some of the heavy-duty weapons are really hard to get. There's a discussion going around that these weapons can be left behind. Like, your dad goes through the 3 hours of paperwork to get the AR-15 and then leaves it behind for the kid whenever they pass away or whatever. And it seems like, and I don't know all the data. Like, I haven't looked at all of it. But it seems like there's a potential for people to get their hands on these weapons when they shouldn't be able to, through like a family member owning them and that paperwork not being fully sorted out. So how do we figure that out? How do we figure out inheriting? Like, I don't know, what's the process with inheriting weapons? I genuinely don't know what that's like. Addie?
I mean, I don't know what the process is that we have today, but I know that is, like a big problem with guns. Like, people, I don't know about inheriting, but like even just people having those kind of weapons locked up in their house that aren't locked up properly, or their kid finds out the code to the safe and gets into it. But I think weapons themselves, even like to a point where bullets and like how much bullets you're buying, it should all be specifically to the person. It should be, you should have to log your ID, your name, things like that, so that way they know, the government can keep an eye on you if you pass away and you have these weapons registered under your name. We know that you have this gun, and this gun, so they know that, okay, where are these guns going? Where are they now that they've been purchased? Where should they go next? I don't know what the policy is about inheriting weapons at this point, but that is something that's what I think we should be doing at the very least.
Okay. Does the government if the government knows what guns you have, does that make it easier if they want to get tyrannical to know how to deal with everybody? Like, is there an argument that the government shouldn't know what guns we own? Pat?
You have to register a firearm when you buy it. Like, the government does know if you register it now. But if you are caught with an unregistered firearm, that's not great. Like, you probably serve jail time for that. When you buy a firearm, you have to, register it. What kind of gun is it? What's the brand, the model, serial number, what caliber is it? So they already know. That's if you register it, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
More of the extreme side of the Second Amendment supporters. But then, in turn with that, when you have people who do register firearms and they break the law, it is sort of a protection mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Like if there's some guy who sort of snapped and is threatening to, I don't know, like kill the district attorney or something like that in, say, Allegheny County.
Mm-hmm.
The police can, go through the ATF database and they can say, oh, John Doe has XYZ registered to him. So we
Mm-hmm.
know for a fact that he has access to whatever firearms are on that list.
Mm-hmm.
As if there's more on that list and he didn't register them, we don't know.
Sure.
So there is a system in place. A lot of people aren't a fan of it. I think it's a good thing because there are some nut jobs out there who
Mm-hmm.
will take advantage of not having registered firearms. I mean, you watch like cops or body cam footage and,
Mm-hmm.
you see how big of a deal they make it when they pull somebody over with an unregistered firearm because you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's when it teeters on the edge of dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I grew up around guns. I was taught gun safety from a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important when you are buying a gun. If you plan to have it in the household or around kids, I feel like it's important that you make it aware and you sort of teach the importance of how this is a tool. Like this is not a
Mm-hmm.
toy, it's a tool.
Mm-hmm.
And that also adds to that layer of protection. If people are aware of what they're holding and what they're buying,
Mm-hmm.
that is a protection layer on top of the registration process.
Mm-hmm. Addie?
I agree with that, definitely. I think knowing the consequences of like what it is that you have, like what it can do, I think that should honestly be a requirement before you even are able to get your gun license or buy a gun. Like you should, have to watch a video or something, or like just some kind of class like they do whenever women go to get abortions. They have to watch a video about their baby and how,
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing. I think that should be, a realistic like thing that people should have to do. I also think that when you're purchasing a gun, you should have to, have a safe to keep it in. Like you have to prove that you have somewhere to keep it locked up, especially if you have children, There's been so many instances recently where kids are getting a hold of their parents' guns and then hurting people. Even when I was in high school, I lost one of my fellow high school students to gun violence in that exact way. Another kid got his parents' gun. They were playing around with it, and it ended up taking a kid's life. I think the consequences of gun violence are just very real, and keeping things locked up, knowing the consequences of what you have, it's essential to safely using guns.
Yeah. Matt, we haven't heard from you in a while. Any thoughts?
Well, I don't know. I'm kind of like split on this because I understand the necessity for registering guns and stuff, but also I feel like the idea that the government can know like everything, like the more the government knows, the less I trust the government. Like the more the government wants to know, the less I trust the government.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, what's the stuff? Who's to say what gun? Like, where do they draw the line at banning guns?
Mm-hmm.
At banning what type of guns you can own?
Yeah.
Like, who's to say that?
Yeah, that's tricky. That goes for a lot of different things. That goes for a lot of different discussions that we're having. Okay, I think multiple people have brought up like holding the government accountable with the weapons. Here's my genuine question for all of you. Has that ever happened in our history? Has the government ever looked at the however many guns it is in this country and said, "Oh, well, we shouldn't do this thing because they might do something about it"? Has that happened a single time in the history of our country?
No, it hasn't. Now, as to if that sort of thought went through the minds of the decision makers, I'm not quite sure because that's a terrifying thought. Be like, maybe we shouldn't. But To my knowledge, no.
I'm like pro gun, like
Yeah.
I am, but I was listening to like a comedy bit, and this guy was like, I thought it was really funny. He was like, has this ever stopped anything from happening? Like,
No.
elites are going to private islands doing horrible shit. Like the government is doing all sorts of stuff, and we've got a lot of guns as it is. I think that's interesting. Like on paper, I think that that's a reasonable argument to say that you should be able to stop the overreach of government with guns. But in this country, has that ever stopped them? You good, Pat?
And I think it's funny with that because it's, I understand like the government overreach where it's, like a bunch of us we have ARs or we have, shotguns or high caliber rifles or something like that. But the US has drones. Like we have tanks.
That's also what I was thinking. If they really wanted to take people out, wouldn't they just roll out the laser gun that they've been hiding in Area 51? Like they would just blast you.
Reaper drones that have Hellfire missiles attached to them.
Yeah.
So your 12 gauge shotgun probably isn't going to do much.
But that's the thing is like that I think that's an interesting part of that discussion. Then is how do we balance that? Because maybe people should.
It's the comical part of that discussion.
Maybe people should be able to own guns. But my thought's always been, if they really wanted to, I think they could take you out. I don't think your AR-15 in your basement's going to do a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. And I'm saying I think people should be able to have guns. Like I think they should. Okay. How do we figure out mass shootings? What do we have to do? I think there's a mental health aspect to this discussion that probably needs to be had. Does anyone have any thoughts on that part of it? Matt?
I feel like school shootings are caused more by the culture than by the guns themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because people have always had, like, for basically the entire history of this country, have had access to weaponry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only just recently that these things are being happening more and more often.
Mm-hmm. Addie?
I can see like that point, and I do somewhat agree with that. I do think the current state of the world definitely has a lot to do with an uptick in like school shootings and mass shootings in that way, but I think we also have to look at other countries in this scenario, other countries with stricter gun regulations and things like that, how school shootings like that are not happening in other countries that don't have that have more strict regulations. So I do think to a certain degree it has a lot to do with the current state of affairs of the world, but I think the bigger issue with that is access, is what we were talking about earlier, parents not locking up their guns, just general access to those kind of weapons is what is the real, not cause, but, trigger.
Mm-hmm. Pat?
I do think that there is an untouched mental health crisis going on, which is, I feel, the larger sort of umbrella of these issues. I mean, that's a conversation that you can have for 6 days straight.
Yeah, probably.
But, I mean, if you look at, like you said, like if you look at the rest of the world that have stricter gun laws where this doesn't happen, I mean, look at the UK. Like, they don't have school shootings, but how many mass stabbings do they have a year? How many?
I think when I see London has a lot of like knife violence.
Last I looked at the statistics, the amounts of violent deaths in the U.S. are stab, not gun. So that
You mean in the UK?
No, U.S.
Oh, in the US.
Yes, last I checked.
Okay.
But even the UK, there's no gun violence, but the amount of stabbing related deaths or severe injuries or severe incidents outnumber those of mass shootings in the U.S., which is then it's like, do we ban kitchen knives? Like, I don't know. That's where it's tough.
Yeah.
Because it's, but I think the overarching issue is the mental health crisis that
Okay.
no one really wants to address.
Okay.
I see your point there, but I have to mention a knife. You can kill one person at a time with a knife. You can kill a whole lot of people in a short amount of time with the gun. It has a lot, farther reach. You know, you can shoot people at a distance. A knife is, you know, that is a valid issue. Like, you know, in, you know, places where the gun regulations are stricter, there is, you know, higher knife violence or violence in like that kind of way. But I think we're missing the point of the capabilities of the weapon itself.
Okay.
Yeah, she makes a good point.
Yeah. The mental health crisis thing is interesting because I don't think that's the part that anyone wants to have a discussion about, because I don't really know how. Because I think that is there an economic aspect? I know we're maybe getting a little far away from the guns, but I do think the mental health thing is probably the crux of the problem for a lot of people. There's like an economic side to that, I think. Like there's people in this country working 4 jobs. They're doing all this crazy stuff, just trying to get by. And then, yeah, like eventually, yeah, you're going to go crazy. Like, of course you are, because you're working 4 jobs and you're barely figuring it out.
The price of living's nuts. I mean, look
Yeah,
how
it's
much
insane.
Food costs, gas.
Yeah.
You know, and like how much you look at your paycheck, how much comes out in taxes. Like it's tough. Like look how much we're paying for college.
Yeah.
I'm screwed personally. Like, oh my God, I don't even want to look at
The numbers.
No, it stresses me out just thinking about it.
Yeah.
But then like I get it. I understand the lead up to that crisis.
Yeah.
But I feel like there should be more resources allocated to help people that have reached that final point of that problem.
Yeah, I feel like Point Park's got a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there's probably a lot of people here that are not doing too well.
I feel like that's just,
It's probably everywhere.
especially like our generation of kids. Like,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who have suffered and are currently suffering from mental health, and you know, it's the unfortunate reality. I'm sure everybody in this room knows at least one person.
Oh yeah.
And it's sad because your option is either you get heavily medicated, or you just kind of thug it out. Like really, like there's no, it's tough. Like there's not really any other options other than that, and either way sucks. It sucks. Simple as that.
I think especially also like the financial aspect of that, like you know, if you're just thugging it out, but you have no money, you can't even go to therapy. You can't even you don't even have a bed to cry in. Like
I'm sorry.
there's just, it's like layers on top of layers, this issue.
It's not funny, but that was funny.
Yeah.
That was, but that's kind of what you have to do. Is like I feel like there are just people in this country that just are kind of floating around, just kind of existing, and they're probably getting crazier by the day, and it's not even really their fault.
Yeah, they're being kicked while they're down.
Yeah.
Every
yeah.
day it's like, oh, what's going to happen today?
And I think our generation we probably have a lot of dealt with like trauma. We're in regard to mass shootings. Like that's probably something that a lot of us have to deal with. Yeah.
I know me personally, like my little sister's still in high school, and it's happened at least 3 times since the year has started. She's been in lockdown and had to get sent, been, locked in a classroom. I just get a text, hey, I'm in lockdown, I'm okay, but I'll let you know what happens. And for me, it's my little sister. She's 17 years old.
Yeah.
Or 16 years old. And I'm and it's, my heart drops every time I get that text. And I remember not even that long ago being in school, how many times my sophomore year, we got sent home 3 times in the span of 2 weeks.
Wow.
Because of gun violence threats.
Where are you from?
Mount Pleasant.
Okay.
Yeah, by Greensburg.
That's a lot. I never had that many in high school.
Me neither.
I never. That's crazy.
I don't know if it's just the area that I come from, because it is I don't know, very cows and farms and pastures. So a lot of people have access to weapons because
yeah, there's probably a lot of guns over there.
there's a lot of guns
Yeah.
in the area. So a lot of things happen.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
I never had that many. I think I had 1 or 2.
Never at my school.
Maybe.
But there were some of the schools near me that had, some of the public schools near me back home were, some of them had bomb threats.
Yeah.
I think we had one of those.
Yeah.
I think it was fake though.
Yeah.
There was one. I heard. I don't remember who told me this story, but I heard my one friend told me a story about a bomb threat in their school, and it was like a note that said the bomb was in the toilet. Like if you flushed it, it would set off the bomb. The principal just goes in the bathroom and just flushes the toilet. Nothing happens, and they all just go back to class.
Oh jeez. Oh jeez. That's a different kind of bomb. That's a different kind of
I
bomb
think
for
they
real.
were
That's
referring to something else.
that's a real problem. That's a different situation. The school's got to deal with that. Yeah, that's a tricky one because also like I can't imagine what it's like being a parent.
No.
I can't imagine what that's like.
I mean, my mom's a teacher, and she.
That's like double. That's
Yeah.
like worse.
I mean, she's done majority of her like consistent like teaching has been in Catholic school.
okay.
And I mean, I grew up going to Catholic school. I went to private school for high school. Luckily, I was fortunate enough to not have any of these sort of scares, for lack of a better term, with stuff like this. But my mom did sub in the public school where I'm from for a while she was like raising me and my two brothers. And I mean, the shit that goes on.
Yeah.
She was scary. Like I know somebody who does. They teach in inner city Philly, and they like that stuff's scary. Like the kids are exposed to this in and outside the classroom,
Yeah.
and that's where it's like, whoa, maybe we should look at other things in society.
Yeah.
We should look at sort of what goes on in the home life,
Sure.
because that's where it all starts.
Yeah.
Like that's where like any sort of mental health really starts, whether people want to admit that or not. Like it starts at a young age. Like you're not around other people until you're what, like 5? Like, you don't go to school.
Yeah, 4 or 5
Yeah.
you're not until you're
No.
consistently
It's
around
like any
other
like
people.
deep rooted trauma 95% of the time is coming from when you're really rooted in the home life. And even 4 or 5, you go to preschool, man. Like it's
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
going out or hanging out with friends. I mean, maybe you are, I don't know, but like if like that's where it starts. It starts in the home life, and I feel like that's another thing that needs to be addressed is sort of allowing or having resources where if kids have a shit home life, they can kind of get out and sort of not fall victim to that trend.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah. Anyone's thoughts on that? Anything else? Yeah, Eddie.
I think it's just a very multifaceted issue.
Yeah, it is.
I think no
Yeah.
matter what, there's no just one solution to this problem. It's not like, oh, if we ban all guns, then all gun violence will go away. Or if we
Probably
make
not.
all people take, regular therapy sessions for years so that they can work through their trauma, I don't think it's going to fix it. I think, we got to look at mental health, the economy, like economic state of the world, people being homeless and that kind of thing. And gun regulation. I think it all needs to work together to fix this problem.
There's a social media aspect too. I imagine like these are kids. They're trying to get clout. They're trying to get their name, and unfortunately, I think we're in a situation where, we almost glorify it too much. Like it's a horrible thing. We need to talk about it. But I think there's to an extent of like, do we need to give the person airtime? Do we need to put their picture on the screen? Probably not. Like, don't give them any sort of maybe. Pat.
I think social media definitely doesn't help. I mean, I think our generation can sort of talk about this best because we experienced and grew up with how social media has evolved over the last, I'd say, 15 years. Like I remember like old Instagram. Like it is completely different than how it is now.
Yeah.
And I feel like, it's scary what goes on there.
Yeah.
And, you have those, I remember like back in middle school, like you'd have those teachers. It's like, oh, you get those lectures about the dangers of social media.
Yeah.
None of us wanted to listen to it.
No.
Because you're 12. You're like, oh, I'm going to,
And also it's coming from a person that's probably way older than you. That's like, are you even on Instagram? It's like, no. If it came from a person that was on the platform, maybe we would have listened a little bit better.
And then we put these people on pedestals on social media who like aren't really great human beings for like most of it. But but also like the people that we do put on pedestals become influencers for the younger kids.
Yeah.
And they become like a symbol of something. Symbol
Sure.
of beauty or success or something like that. And they have these like on video, they have great lifestyles,
Yeah.
you know, but the way that they portray it is unobtainable.
Yeah, it's all fabricated. It's all They're all just posing for the picture.
Yeah.
They're figuring out how to make their life
Yeah.
look the best. And I think that probably does fuck up kids.
It does
a lot.
I mean, I remember
Yeah.
I remember growing up watching like the FaZe Clan videos, like the FaZe House New York, and
Yeah.
these guys were like, oh, that's so sick. Like I wanna, you know.
It's a mess it's probably a mess behind the
Oh,
scenes.
it's ruined. Like I remember a couple months ago, FaZe Rain came out. He's like, I've been in rehab for months. I was like,
Yeah.
what?
They're probably all on drugs.
Yeah, they don't.
They're
own,
all on drugs.
They don't own any of the company.
No.
It's all unobtainable, and it's all fake.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to convince a 12 or a 13-year-old
To not go for
that
that.
it's fake.
Yeah.
You know, because there's also like the dark side of social media where there's, you know, you get catfished and all that
Yeah.
disgusting stuff that
Yeah.
actually makes me sick to my stomach. But I think social media is it's no man's land.
Yeah, that's a problem. And I want to get back to this because, Matt, you brought up, because I think this may have actually been like a point of disagreement that I think we can discuss. You have mentioned like the more the government knows, the less you trust it, maybe the more skeptical you are. You don't want them knowing. Maybe we don't want them knowing that these weapons are registered. Is there any sort of in your mind, does that apply to all weapons? Does that apply to just some?
I think it applies to all weapons
Okay.
because we should have. I feel like we should have access to military grade technology.
Okay.
I just think it's cool.
Okay. But what are the societal ramifications of that? How do we make sure that it doesn't get into the hands of the wrong people? Or are you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, I'm just saying, are you saying that is maybe an argument that's used to keep stuff out of the hands of people whenever maybe it should be?
Yeah, I'll say that. So like, I had a train of thought and it just left. I can't
Okay.
remember.
But that's what I'm curious about, because you're saying that we should have, now when you say military grade, like F-35s, that seems a little dangerous to me. I don't know how to fly one of those. Or do you mean like the $30,000 night vision goggles that I should have bought for myself instead of going to Point Park? Which one are we thinking of here?
Both.
Really?
Yeah, because
Okay. How does that work? I'm curious about how. Yeah, can you explain this a little bit more, maybe?
part of the Second Amendment that everyone always forgets about is also the right to create militias, your own militias,
Okay.
which are basically private militaries that you can use to defend your hometown.
Sure.
And
Well-regulated is also part of the language.
yeah,
So what does well-regulated look like? My question to you is are F-35s a well-regulated militia? The farmer in Iowa that has a local militia. I'm curious, like, are rocket launchers, is that well-regulated? That's my question. That's my question for you. Because I think the well-regulated part is where we get stuck up on a lot of this stuff. Like we say, we want a well-regulated militia. What does that look like in 2023? What does that look like in this current time?
that's a good question.
Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Pat?
I mean, me personally, I would love a Black Hawk helicopter. I'm not gonna lie.
That would be fire. I'm not even going to lie. I said the F-35 jokingly. I would love to fly one of those.
I would love.
That'd be
just,
sick.
Like, sit out the door of a Black Hawk would be awesome. I'm not gonna lie.
That would be sick.
But I mean, if you knew the right people and you have the money, you can acquire this stuff. Like military. Well, the term military grade equipment is not the best. Okay.
There's better shit.
Yeah, the civilian market is much better than military grade. That's all I'm saying. Because military grade, like those Humvees and stuff, or the helicopters, they need constant support. Like they need to be fixed.
Like maintenance,
Yeah.
refueling,
Like
the
even-
gas alone in today's economy
Yeah. I mean, even like
for a
you talk-
Black Hawk.
Yeah, right. Can you imagine the insurance claim on a Black Hawk helicopter?
Can you imagine what it's like to refuel an F-35?
It's
Thousands of
It's
dollars?
not fitting in my driveway, but
No, it's not.
you know, it's not fitting down its sheets either.
No.
But it's the civilian market is much better than the military grade equipment. I mean, obviously, there are some aspects that, you know, the PA National Guard isn't going to have what the Green Berets have. Like, obviously, what the Green Berets have or what DevGru has or something like that is going to be much better than what you can get on the civilian market.
Sure.
But like the M4, it's a great rifle, right? Like it's effective. It's proven itself time and time again. But there are better rifles out there on the civilian market. Like SIG just got the new military contract. You can buy that rifle that is being built for the military in a civilian capacity. Obviously, it's not going to have fully automatic capabilities, but it's the same rifle. Chamber's the same round. So now when you get to like equipment wise, I don't think that civilians should have tanks. That kind of scares me. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
You piss off your neighbor and he rolls out a M1 Abrams from his garage. That's a scary thought right there.
And if anyone listening to this show thinks that Americans wouldn't do that, reevaluate where you are. Look at the country you're living in.
Would I fly a Black Hawk helicopter? Absolutely. Like, if I could have a minigun in the doors as well, I would. I'm not going to lie, because that would be awesome.
Just to maybe even shooting it at nothing, like just into the sand.
Yeah, that'd be so much fun. Can you imagine? That'd be awesome. I'm not going to use it in any violent way. Let me preface that. But if I could just like,
in case the government's listening to this.
Exactly. Yeah. For future job prospects, I do not want to use a Black Hawk helicopter in any violent way. But like, I live across the state. If I can avoid driving and I could fly a helicopter from here back home, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Be a lot quicker.
Be a lot quicker.
You don't got to deal with the Fort Pitt tunnels anymore.
No, it'd be a lot cooler.
Those are the worst.
Yeah, it'd be a lot cooler, you know? Like,
Pittsburgh driving got a lot easier. Now just land your helicopter on the top of the UPMC building.
Yeah, and then I could parachute off the UPMC building.
All right, we're getting a little lost in the weeds here. This is very fun. But, okay, does anyone have any thoughts on Matt's take that we should have more access? Any other thoughts on this? More access to stuff?
I just wonder how imminent we think a government takeover is. I don't know. I feel like we worry a lot about something like what happened with Hitler happening again, but I feel like, not that it's obviously impossible, because obviously anything's possible, but I do wonder why we feel such a need to prepare ourselves for something that I don't think is going to be coming anytime soon.
Well, I could make the argument that that's what the Germans thought.
I mean,
that's what the Soviets thought.
That's valid, but I do think we're the time period. We have to look at the time period. We have to look at the things that we have now, the resources and things that we have now. Like back when Hitler did this, people couldn't spread information. He was taking over places that couldn't, let the next place know that they were they were marching for that place next. We have lines of information that communicate so quickly. We can talk to other people from other countries. Like, I just think that with the things that we have today, something like that happening so easily, like the way that it happened back then, is not that possible. Like, it's not impossible, but it's not that possible.
Okay. Pat?
Yeah, I don't think that it's, now, in movie sense, it's possible. But when you really think about it, like, I've heard this argument a lot where it's like, oh, if the government does ban firearms, it'll be the police and the military confiscating them. I don't know if people are really aware how pro-Second Amendment a lot of
police and military people probably are.
Yeah. I know people who are cops, and the stuff that they have is unreal. Like, they have their... I know a guy who's an avid gun collector, and he used to be a state trooper. He, that's... And even, oh, the government's going to crack down. What are they going to use? The army? They're some of the most patriotic people in the world. They're not going to crack down on, their families. So I think it's unrealistic, but you can't take it out of account. You know what I mean?
Okay.
'Cause then in today's day and age, they might not necessarily even need the military to do it. with
No, I don't think so.
no, you can cyber stuff. They
Yeah.
have, stuff like that. That's the stuff I'm scared about is cyber capabilities.
Yeah, I guess maybe the argument, there's maybe a better argument that they're not going to come and physically confiscate the weapons,
No.
but they're going to use social media. They're going to
Propaganda.
use, I mean, from what I've seen, they've already got the tech companies in their back pocket.
Oh yeah.
They can kind of make them do whatever they want.
Yeah. Like
So-
you said, I mean,
Sorry, Trevor, do you have thoughts? We'll get to you.
I was just gonna say that this the argument about the government having less regulations because they would take away is very theological. It's philosophical in a sense. Like in theory, that could be a concern. Will it happen? Likely not. However, I feel like that is why the issue is presented. It's probably not gonna happen, but it could. So we need to prevent it from happening. And to elaborate on the point of police having firearms, it was actually in the case of Heller v. DC, it was U.S. v. Heller was Heller who was suing to have his firearms permit in D.C. was a police officer in the Metropolitan Police Department.
Oh, can you not have?
After that case, they said it was like that you had to have like a special license, like to have it at home or something
yeah,
like that.
because DC technically isn't a state.
Right, yeah, so they're going to have different gun laws
Yeah.
than other
Yeah,
places.
They were real stringent back before this case.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
but he was a police officer who
Yeah.
said, I want a gun for home to defend myself and my family, and sued all the way up to the Supreme Court and argued that the government didn't have the right to take away his right to bear arms.
Mhm.
So I feel like that would also strengthen your point on police and the role of firearms
Yeah.
for private use there.
Yeah, that is actually a good point that I don't think we talk about a lot, is that there's probably a lot of people, if the government did try to weaponize the police and the military against people, there's probably a lot of them that would say, no, we're not doing that.
Oh yeah.
And probably enough of them that they could stop it from happening.
Like they don't they realize that how well armed the civilian population is. They don't want to get shot at by they don't want to
By my uncle.
yeah, you're walking
They don't want to get shot at
you're
by
walking
him.
down the street you already have a target on your back as a police officer to begin with,
Yeah, you do. Or as anyone in the military, anyone in the
Yeah.
armed services, you have a target.
You have a target on your back. Like if you have to strap on body armor for a job, you have a target on your back.
Yeah.
Simple as that. But they recognize the fact that they're outnumbered severely.
Mm-hmm.
Severely outnumbered by 100 to 1. There's a Chinese general that once said that is a bad idea to invade the U.S. because there's a firearm behind every blade of grass. It was either
Yeah.
Chinese or Japanese, I forget.
Either way, so that's another part of the conversation is I don't think that ground, other than maybe these hot spots like Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, places like that, I'm curious as to how common actual ground invasions are in this current time when we have cyber warfare, we have tactical nukes, we have autonomous weapon systems.
Yeah.
We don't really need to ground invade a country, but if someone tried, good luck getting through Texas. That's my thought. Is how are you going to get through Texas without just blowing it up? You can't really probably get through any of these. I bet there's parts of California you couldn't even get through. Up north where it's really conservative.
It works where in countries, we did it in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
They were more technologically, or they weren't as technologically advanced as us. And a lot of those, we were going through Iraq, and a lot of the Iraqis were just surrendering because they weren't, the only real people were the Iraqi Guard, Saddam's secret police that were.
Yeah.
But strategically, you want to invade the U.S. Say it's China, right?
Sure.
Say you get through, well, probably if they try to invade, we'd interdict them at sea. Say you get through the Navy, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Theoretically speaking, all right? You go to invade East and West Coast. You then have to deal with Coast Guard and other federal maritime units,
Mm-hmm.
Border Patrol, any local SWAT teams, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Say you get past them. You now have regular Army plus
Mm-hmm.
reservists and National Guard.
Yep.
Say you get through them. You then have paramilitary units within the U.S., meaning like SWAT teams or other law enforcement special operations.
Uh-huh. And then my uncle. And then my uncle's last on the list with his guns.
Yeah.
You have to get through all those people.
And say you do get to the civilian population, theoretically, your military is so worn thin.
And they know it's coming, too.
Yeah.
So they've done whatever organizing they can. Yeah.
That's like you ever seen that show where they like run through all like the glass doors?
No.
It's like there's like a game show where they try to run through a bunch of glass. That's what it's like.
That's
And
so...
the further you get, the harder it gets.
Sure. Yeah. So that's maybe
what it's like.
Maybe that's an argument for why we should have. But again, I kind of agree with you. Is like, it's kind of a situation. Maybe this is a situation where we kind of are like, should we or should we not have the guns up until the point where it happens, and then we're like, we're glad.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know, like, is that a situation where maybe like we have to? Is this a situation where maybe we have to put up with, and not put up with? I don't want to say put up with, but is this a situation where we have to accept a little bit of the bad to also get the good? Trevor.
I would say yes. And we'd have to do one of the hardest things to do in the American system, and that is compromise.
Yes. Yeah.
Compromise.
Don't say that word around us. We don't like it.
Compromise by addressing the issue from all sides. Mental health, gun violence, gun rights. Like, address every aspect of it and collectively figure out a solution that can work for everybody. It might not be the best solution for everybody, but it's one that can work for everybody.
Okay. Anyone else's thoughts? Pat?
I agree. I mean, the only way that we're going to solve any issue in this country is to come to an agreement on things, which historically is impossible for the American public.
It's possible. I've seen that it's possible right when the cliff is like here.
Yes.
Like right whenever the car is about to. It's kind of like in the movies whenever they slam on the brakes and the two front wheels of the car go over the cliff, but it doesn't quite. We're really good at that.
Or when it's like once we've bled.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
no one want to deal with Al Qaeda, 9/11, boom, everyone's like, let's go.
Let's
go
get them.
Let's
Yeah.
get them, right?
Same thing with World War II. We were
Yeah,
like, Pearl Harbor happens. We're going over
yeah,
there.
it was like we didn't want. I mean, that was a bad plan on the Japanese's part, but it was. No one wants to be involved in World War II.
No.
And then they attacked us, and everyone's like, you know what? Forget what I said. Let's go.
Yeah.
Right. So it was once patriotism is brought into it, I feel like that's a different conversation. But
Sure.
like common agreements on domestic political issues, I don't know the last time that anyone has come to agreements on really anything domestically within the last, say, 100 years of this country. Because
I don't know about 100, but definitely in the last like 20, it's been pretty tough.
It's very tough.
Yeah.
And I mean, like you said, nothing's going to change until people come to an agreement, which they won't. But
Yeah.
there's hope.
Sure. Any other thoughts on gun rights regulation? Are we ready to move on? Okay. Final topic is climate change. Any opening statements from anybody about climate change? No? Okay. First question. How do we balance, because this is the conversation I see happening. How do we balance the third world coming up with they're going to be emitting carbon? A lot of them are. Like Africa is going to be the most developed. That's going to be the continent with the most development, I think, over the next like 50 years, they've said. Africa's going to shoot up. They're going to industrialize. Unless they go for clean energy right off the bat, they're going to be emitting carbon. So how do we figure out the net zero carbon thing in the U.S. and how do we? Essentially, what I'm asking is like, are we going to be the people that go to the third world and say, nope, no developing because that's carbon and we don't want you emitting carbon in the world? Addie?
I don't think so. I think with a lot of the plans that a lot of countries have put forward recently, planning to be carbon neutral by like whatever timeline that they had been setting, a lot of people like 2050, whatever random years they throw out. I think if we are looking at that as like an issue as developing countries producing carbon, I think the way to offset it is obviously for progressed countries to go carbon neutral. So that way, instead of this country's developing and they're producing all this carbon, and we're also just producing this carbon, but we've been doing it for years. Like we have the capabilities to go carbon neutral. We have the technology. We have the resources available to us. We can do it, and a lot of countries are planning to do it. So I think if this is an object of concern for people, then why don't we all go carbon neutral? Let these developing countries work it out until they can get to the point where they can be carbon neutral. Obviously, ideally, a developing country, if they can develop while being carbon neutral, that would be ideal, obviously, but that might not entirely be possible, So I think, the rest of the country should make up for it.
Okay. Thoughts on that? Anybody? Trevor?
Well, I agree with that. It goes back to my point I made during American interventionism. The United States using its soft power, its prestige in the world. We can do that through climate change initiatives, through creating green energy or green sustainable industry. We are the number one economy in the world. We have the largest GDP. We can make it happen. We just choose not to because of certain factors within.
There's a lot of big money
Yeah.
in government. There's a lot of lobbyists, that kind of thing.
But we have the capability, and if we can, let's be honest, the West and China and all the big powers, they're the ones that pollute the most. So if we're gonna use our soft power and prestige, why don't we lead by example by creating industries that are carbon neutral and whatnot?
Okay. It's Pat?
I mean, I would like to see less carbon emission in the world because I don't want to I don't want to see the ramifications that this is going to have. I mean, it probably won't happen within our lifetimes, but it's probably our kids or our grandkids. I think that a carbon neutral initiative in the world is not going to happen unless the U.S. gets involved. Because, I mean, you look at China. China's the number one polluter in the world.
Yeah.
Like, they burn so much coal.
Yeah.
It's unreal. They're dumping waste into rivers that, sort of spread out into the ocean and stuff like that. I mean, you look at how, India pollutes a lot. I mean, they're not going to change unless someone steps. And who else would step in? The Brits? What are they going to do? The Germans and the French? No one's going to listen to the Germans and the French.
No.
Russia's not going to step in because they know that,
they've been backed into a corner by the international community.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we're going to go, hey, by the way, also fix your...
Yeah.
That's my follow-up question is we can go carbon neutral.
Yeah.
But how do we get China? How do we get China to go carbon neutral? How do you get India? How do you get Russia? Because these are not places that are friendly with us to begin with. So how do you get them? Because we're not even the biggest. Obviously, let's say we should go carbon neutral. How much of a dent does that even put in the big picture?
Short term, it doesn't. Long term, I mean, I'm no scientist, so I don't really know. I'm not very well versed in this, but I think in American intervention is a big thing. I don't think this is not a short term thing. Like this is not something that's going to happen overnight. The money that's in oil is big. Look at Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Like we go carbon neutral, Saudi Arabia is going to lose their money.
Yeah.
I mean, there's clean ways to burn oil and gas, and I know a lot. Like the U.S. is big. Like I know a lot of places have sort of found cleaner ways to burn gas and frack and stuff like that. Again, I'm no scientist, so I don't really know a lot about this. But I mean, I worked for PennDOT this past summer, and all the trucks were they revamped all the dump trucks to effectively burn gas and oil in a clean manner.
Okay.
Again, I don't know what that means. I just know that there's stickers
Neither
on the
do I.
truck.
There's no experts.
There's a sticker on the
here.
truck, and a lot of places preach that. I mean, you see the PAT buses; they say, like,
Yeah.
"Oh, burning clean Pennsylvania gas."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't think that there are ways that we're going to solve this without being involved. And also, I think that the technology is there to become carbon neutral, But you look at electric cars, Tesla, Polestar, stuff like that.
Yeah.
That run on batteries and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're pretty cool, personally. Like it's a battery powered car. But what goes into making the batteries? Lithium. Those lithium mines are not great for the
No,
environment. Like,
they're not.
Massive craters. So unless we can find a better way to
Cobalt too. The cobalt ones are
mining,
really
yeah.
bad.
And look at
over in the Congo, they're
look at
horrible.
Look at how you mine cobalt. Slave labor.
Yeah, it's all slave labor.
It's all slave labor.
Yeah.
And they are no PPE, nothing.
No.
Just hands, no face mask, nothing.
No.
And look at how you dispose of those batteries.
They dump them in a field.
Yeah.
They dump them in a landfill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So unless we can
Sorry. Wrap it up, Pat.
unless we can find a way to sort of clean up the way we build the technology, then that'll sort of be the stepping stone to more advances in that way.
Okay.
I definitely agree. I agree with that, and I think looking it through the viewpoint of the technology that we have to make things, more green is bad. So why are we even bothering to go green? Because and again, with other countries that produce more carbon than we do, oh well, even if we go carbon neutral, like they're still going to be producing all this carbon. So what's the point of us, going neutral? I think that viewpoint is what is harmful and standstill in this, battle against climate change and the environment changing. The ramifications of this stuff is going to be coming up a lot sooner than we think it's going to be. In our life, like we're already reaping the consequences of climate change. Think of this summer even. It was 95 degrees the entire summer, and then the next, like the day after a 95-degree day, it was 60 degrees outside. And now it's cold and we can't get it, back up. And every summer in the past 5 years has been a new record, the new hottest summer. Last year I think 2022 is the hottest year on record. So we are facing these consequences now. So while we might not have, the best technology to do this kind of things, or while when we go carbon neutral, not everyone else is, I feel like that shouldn't matter in the grand scheme of things. I think putting our best foot forward and doing as much as we possibly can to minimize our carbon footprint and make sure we're going more green. I think that is what we should be focusing on.
Okay. Matt?
I feel like before we even try to go green, we need to finalize the technology required to do that.
Okay.
Because,
What do you mean by finalize?
I mean, or not finalize, but actually create proper technology.
Okay. Is there any particular area of clean energy that you're looking at? Like wind, solar? Nuclear. Okay. That was my next follow-up question, by the way. So we'll go into nuclear after your thoughts here.
I feel like if we can understand more how to create better energy in a better way than burning carbon, then we can go green, but not before we figure out the way.
Okay, and why do you feel that way?
Because I feel like the way that we have been doing it works.
Okay. Any thoughts on that?
The way we've been doing it, do you mean the way we've been producing green energy, or do you mean just the way that we've been non-green energy, just the way we've been doing it?
Yeah, just the way we've been doing it, non-green energy.
I feel like I disagree with that statement that it works. Yes, it gets the job done, but we've seen oil is not forever. We're not just always going to have a supply of oil. That's going to run out one day, no matter what.
Yeah.
So, sure, it's working right now, but I don't think that should just be the way that we think about it. I don't think we should just be, oh, well, it works right now, so let's not even worry about going and venturing into anything else.
Well, Matt, are you saying that we should go into clean energy as soon as the technology is ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
As soon as the technology is there, we can start transitioning, but not before, I think.
Okay. I think with that though, how much of our funding and energy are we putting into green energy? Like we're not putting nearly as much effort into that. I feel like,
I don't have the numbers on that, but I do
Yeah,
think that it's probably not as much as we're putting into like the military.
yeah, like
Probably as much money.
we spend more money on our defense spending than the next 10 countries combined. So
Yeah.
whatever reason we have for that, but like
Yeah.
we're not putting nearly that much effort into our green energy things.
Okay. So because my thought is like, how do you can't really make wind work here. You probably can't make solar work here.
The sun doesn't shine in PA.
PA is actually one of the leading states in nuclear energy.
Yeah.
So should we embrace, any thoughts on nuclear energy? Should we embrace it? Should we not embrace it? Trevor?
I feel like in the 1970s when we were really getting into nuclear energy,
Mm-hmm.
we were onto something. Renewable, sustainable energy. The only real problem, honestly, with nuclear energy is disposing of nuclear waste.
Yeah.
Other than that issue, it's effectively a clean, sustainable energy.
Mhm.
We've had, of course, you had meltdowns at 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl,
Fukushima.
People don't want to use nuclear energy because of all that. But all three of those were all caused by human error.
Yeah, and I think the death toll of Fukushima is single digits.
It's minuscule.
I think it's single digits. I think 3 Mile Island was single. I don't want to say that because I actually don't know the death count
It was
from.
also minuscule. Compared to both of them, compared to Chernobyl was...
Huh? Yeah. Chernobyl's the really bad one.
Yeah.
That's the one that left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. But from what I've heard, nuclear reactors now are pretty sweet. Like they're really, really efficient and they're really safe.
Yeah, they're also cheaper.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm not saying they're like, $20 cheap.
No.
Like they're
Is
much,
it cheaper than a semester at Point Park?
No.
No, I can't buy a nuclear reactor.
But it's cheaper than oil. But it's tough because with it's cheaper than gas, yes, but the after effects is where you kind of get caught up in the technicality. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's like the batteries. They're a great idea, but the creation and disposal kind of offsets the benefit of them.
Okay.
And with like you said, like they bury the nuclear waste under mountains, and then they transport them, and then that's not great. I
don't know. Yeah,
I'm no nuclear physicist, but that doesn't sound great.
I wish Jeremiah was here.
So
I wish Jeremiah was here for this.
they typically bury them out in the desert.
Yeah,
Like out in
they're out in like Arizona, Nevada,
a lot of
stuff like
states
that.
are pushing back on that
Yeah.
because they don't want that in
No.
the state.
And
Yeah, I mean,
that's where it's kind of
Great.
it's like, oh, this is awesome. I mean, like it's cool stuff. Don't get me wrong. Like nuclear reactors are pretty cool. Like we have nuclear power subs and aircraft carriers,
Yeah,
stuff
that's
like
sick.
that, which is sick. I'm not gonna lie. Like that's pretty cool. Like this is something out of like Star Wars or Star Trek or something. But again, the environmental ramifications that the after it's so great is like it's
That's actually something I've never even like really heard about or like ever touched on with nuclear. Eddie, something thoughts?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I definitely, I see, like, that does, I think nuclear is, something we need to be working on. It's something that the disposal of it specifically is something that we should be figuring out because nuclear energy is beneficial to us. Like, that is, like, one of our, not the easiest, but, like, one of the most efficient ways of going green.
Yeah.
And I definitely agree with, like, what you were saying, like, working on it until, like, not, fully establishing places as, like, green with nuclear energy until we figure out what to do with that, definitely. But,
Yeah.
I think wind energy, solar energy, I don't think we should completely throw those off.
No,
the
I don't think so
table.
either, but I'm saying like solar's not going to work here.
no.
I mean, it
not,
does. There is a lot of places that run off solar energy.
Sure,
Pennsylvania.
but like then we have 3 months of no sun, and it's like, well, this isn't great. We just have like cloudy days. I think it could work, but I think like nuclear. But that's interesting. Yeah, I don't think we should throw it out either. I think it should, like there are plenty of places where wind and solar are going to be great.
Yeah.
do it out in the places where it's sunny.
I think even if if we put those places in like specialized areas where like there's the most wind in this area, so we put the wind the wind turbines in this area and there's more sun, whatever. But it can power a bigger scale if we work on it.
Yeah.
Progress the technology more and more. It can work on a bigger scale and power bigger things than just like one area that doesn't get a lot of sunlight.
Okay.
Even when it comes to like water and stuff, like hydro dams,
Yeah.
they're only effective in certain regions. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a good thought all around, and it's all very interesting and very complex beyond my minuscule understanding of these problems. But I mean, like I think we can all agree that it's how great there are serious setbacks in everything.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate reality is that gas is beneficial for everybody right now. Even no matter how bad it is for the environment, it's unfortunately the best option that we have until we can figure out something better. And I feel like we are on the brink of serious scientific discovery with a lot of this stuff, technological advances. Like I could see a lot of this coming out within the next couple of years. Like probably next, I'd say
with stuff like nuclear fission
like
and stuff
30
like
to
that, they're
40
going to figure
years,
out.
Maybe.
Sure.
But I mean, I'm sure they've already figured out a lot of this stuff. Like, but they're trying to test it and perfect it.
Yeah.
Or I'm sure that NASA has figured stuff out, or defense contractors or something like that. There's a lot of money in this because it benefits all sectors of industry. It benefits commercial. It benefits defense spending, defense build up and stuff like that. Economics. So it's interesting, but we're right there, but we're not where it is going to be completely effective.
I think the problem a lot is we look at things in the short term. We look at oil makes us money now. Oil makes everything now. Like, we don't we're making money. We're stimulating the economy now. We don't think about the long lasting ramifications and how we need to like I said earlier, oil is not forever. We need to be working towards a different solution. So I think overall the government on this issue specifically needs to look a little more long term for longer solutions.
That's the problem with Americans. Is that they want immediate success.
Yeah, we want it now.
Yeah.
We want the new iPhone now, Pat.
Exactly. And
It's made of titanium.
It's pretty cool, I can't lie.
It's kind of sick.
It's kind of sick.
Okay, well, Matt, I want to go back to you, Matt, for a second. So, and I'm not meaning to like put you on the spot with this, but in your mind, what is the point? Like, is there a specific point where we get to where you would say, yeah, this technology is viable enough that we should do a widespread implementation of it in like wherever we can? Like, is there a threshold? Is there a place where you'd say now we're ready?
Probably when we figure out how to make batteries without just like make batteries more efficiently and just more efficiently.
Okay, so that would apply to like wind and solar, like capturing the energy into batteries.
Yeah. And,
Okay.
And even like fission, like with I know China's doing a lot of work with that. Like they had just recently, like not too long ago, held like the power of like the sun.
Yeah, they figured out something with fission, I think.
Yeah.
And again, this is way out of. I officially have no clue what I'm talking about. Fission and fusion are two different things. I think they're working on fission, is what they're working on. Okay, so then what's is there's an maybe an energy independence aspect to this? Is that something that we should pursue, like energy independence from other countries, like especially now with the Ukraine war happening? We got a lot of Russian oil. That was where a lot of countries got their oil.
Yeah.
And now they're no longer doing that. And there was that big problem in Europe where like they were like struggling to get their energy needs up.
I mean, the U.S. has fracking capabilities. Like we have oil reserves. Like PA, like there's a lot of oil that comes out of PA. A lot of oil that comes out of Texas. Not much up here in the north, but a lot down in like southwestern U.S. There's, you go up to Alaska. There's a lot up there. I mean, we have the capabilities, but we don't have the reserve or the oil pockets under the U.S. to sustain the amount that we need.
Right.
So, but this is where kind of we have to, deal with unsavory people in the world. Is you look around the world and who has oil?
Mm-hmm.
The Saudis.
Yeah.
Venezuela.
Sure.
Like I think Brazil has a little bit, but not as much as Venezuela.
Yeah.
The Saudis. Like the Saudis are, we're friendly with the Saudis because we don't that they have oil.
Because they buy out our golf leagues. They're just buying everything now. They're just like buying our soccer
Yeah.
teams. Like, hey, this is
They bought
maybe
Ronaldo. Come on. Now.
could we maybe not take Saudi money to go
Yeah.
play golf?
And it's either we find a better solution. Well, in order to find a better solution, we have to deal with unsavory people.
Sure.
Support us to reach that solution.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't really, again, I'm not an oil expert, but I do know that besides Russia, the other two biggest countries that have oil reserves are the Saudis and Venezuela. And Venezuela is not exactly in the most stable position they've ever been in. Currently.
No.
And like I said, the Saudis aren't great people. But I don't know how else we're gonna get oil.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do a little bit. Like I'd say, grand scheme of things, we could maybe support ourselves for 20% of the oil that we need.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Don't quote me on that, but like we're gonna have to get it from somewhere else, whether we like to think about that or not.
Yeah. Addie?
I think green energy in that way can make us, independent if we put the resources and things into that. We won't.
Yeah.
It kind of circles back to our discussion earlier about American intervention. It'll, a lot of the reasons we get involved is because of oil. That's, why we want to, join these wars and hop in and be the world's police. So I feel like, the green energy, if we can, sustain it ourselves and we can put the work forth to stabilize that kind of energy, it'll free us basically.
Yeah. I love the meme where it's like a country finds oil and then it's like the Bugs Bunny in front of the Soviet flag and it's like, you mean our oil. Like
It's the Key and Peele skit.
yeah.
We have oil.
Yeah. Yeah.
The planes.
Yeah.
About to export some democracy.
Yeah. Yeah. You mean it is for me? Like that's what we do.
And I mean, it's
Yeah, well, that was a part of my question is like, is that a reason that we should go into green energy? Is because if the world continues to get a little more unstable, we should at least have some of the capability to get some of our own energy from home.
yeah. And if we are able to become energy independent and we find a way to, effectively build, maintain, and dispose of green energy methods, then we don't have to be supporting slave labor operations in Africa and these mining places,
Yeah.
or, from China or who also utilize slave labor. Like
Yeah.
then we are on the moral high ground.
Sure. And then the Saudis can just buy our golf leagues
Yeah,
and not necessarily give us oil. They can
Yeah.
just buy stuff from us and we'll take
Exactly.
their money that way.
Exactly.
Okay. Anyone's thoughts on like carbon taxes for corporations? That's another aspect of this that I don't know anything about any of this, by the way, but this is just what I hear. I hear a lot of talk about corporations, and they do get away with a lot of stuff that they shouldn't be able to get away with. So any thoughts on like the effectiveness of that? How do we make sure that corporations pay it back, I guess, like whatever you would call that, like essentially try to bring it back to net zero, I guess is what you'd say. Yeah.
I think that is something that should be our top priority in the surge towards green energy. Pay to pollute policies are, obviously it's not the main cause of a lot of what's, the pollution that's going into the air, but it gives companies this like pass basically to just not be, and like, first of all, a lot of companies will, make those kind of promises where they're like, oh, we're going to go carbon neutral by whatever year. And then these pay to pollute policies, if they pay the fine, they're still within the bounds of what they're allowed to be within.
Yeah.
So I think it gives these companies that sense of they're above the rules, basically. They can just throw money at whatever problem they want, and they can pollute the earth because of that. So I think policies like that are a main cause as to why we haven't moved towards that green energy.
Yeah, they say a lot of things and they don't really do it. Like Google's like, don't be evil. And then one day they removed it and everyone in the world's like, what happened to that, guys? Like they just they said don't be evil and they removed it without telling anybody.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know enough about this stuff, but I feel like you kind of hit the nail on the head with that one. This is far out of my wheelhouse here, but
That's okay. Well, I guess like any concerns that you guys have. Are there any concerns over something like that or over the lack of it, I guess? Yeah, Matt.
Well, considering that the corporations are basically the people who own America
Yeah.
through lobbying and stuff, if that were to come into if that were to be passed, like a carbon tax, it could be used against smaller businesses as well, which wouldn't be good.
Okay, in what way? Like, what are you thinking of with that?
Well, I mean,
Are you saying that that the big corporations maybe have more ways to jump through the loopholes?
Yeah.
And then that sort of burden then falls on smaller businesses that can't do that?
Yeah, that's kind of exact. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Okay. Any thoughts on that? Because that I think is maybe a possibility, and that is maybe a little bit concerning. Because they'll get away with whatever they can get away with.
I think that is a big, reason, as I think the corporations honestly do that kind of thing on purpose. Like the big corporations. That's why we have these movements like the Save the Turtles, don't, use plastic straws anymore, that kind of stuff. We put it on the burden of the people in the smaller countries. We put the world's, environmental state on people when it's not people. It's not these small corporations. Their carbon footprint is this, while the big corporation's carbon footprint is a million times that.
Yeah.
So I think these pay to pollute taxes and things like that, corporations use this, as a way to make smaller companies have to suffer the consequences for their actions, basically.
Okay. Trevor, any thoughts on this?
I'd like to agree with that point. Corporations have gotten away for a long time in this country with blaming the individual populace for the issue of pollution. You don't recycle, so it's not our fault. It's yours. And if you look into it, many of the recycle campaigns or ban plastic straws or individual efforts to try and mitigate climate change, they're all funded by these oil corporations, these big corporations that pollute the environment and whatnot, because they're trying to shift the responsibility from themselves to the people, so that they don't have to answer for what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think that they're gonna get away with whatever they can get away with.
That's why I feel the responsibility has to be on the government. The government has to be making these laws, passing these bills, holding these bigger corporations accountable, because there's no one else to do it. They have all the money, they have all the power in these situations. There's no smaller companies that can hold the bigger companies accountable for. So it falls into the lap of the government. And I think it also partially falls into the lap of people who are supporting certain corporations, fast fashion companies and things like that.
Yeah.
When you buy their products and you support them in this way, makes the things that they're doing think that it's okay. So I think the government has to step in and make the bigger companies listen.
Okay. Pat?
And also with that, when they pay these pollution taxes, the tax goes to the government, and that money that they just paid in taxes is getting funneled into contracts with those same companies. So either way, the money's going back. You know
Sure.
what I mean? So it's like a full circle.
Yeah, that was my next question is what do you do with the money that corporations are paying to pollute? Does that go, I'm assuming it just kind of gets shuffled around and it goes into the pockets of the wrong people.
Yeah, if it's Shell, I don't know if Shell is a big polluter. I'm not sure whether this is the first company. If Shell has has a contract with the government, they're going to pay that pollution tax. And then if the money doesn't go to Shell, it's going to go to, I don't know, Chevron or Lockheed Martin or something like that. Even if Lockheed isn't polluting, it's still going to somewhere else.
No, it's going to go into whatever brings the money back in.
And Lockheed Martin is going to pay Shell for fuel to test their fighter jets and stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
So either way, the money's going back in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't want to say it defeats the purpose, but it's repetitive.
And the money probably should go into like green energy.
Yeah, and I'm sure some of
initiatives.
it
like that's
does,
probably like
but not
if
enough.
if we're going to do it, the money needs to go towards
Yeah.
phasing that thing out,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is.
Yeah, agreed.
So I'm a little confused. I feel like I missed something, but do you mean like the pay to pollute taxes, or do you?
Sure, yeah, like the pay to pollute programs, like if a corporation's paying the government
Yeah.
to pollute, that money should be used. That money should not just go back into the system.
Yeah.
Back into like big money
Yeah,
interest.
yeah. Okay.
Like that's where it should not.
Sorry,
go there.
I missed something. I understand what you're saying now.
That would be the argument then.
Yeah.
That money should go into green energy initiatives
Yeah.
that then allow us to phase out the
Yeah,
pay to pollute
definitely.
taxes,
Yeah,
or at
if-
least to minimize them.
If we're gonna,
that would be
you
an
know,
argument.
give this to the, like if we have these pay to pollute taxes in
Mm-hmm.
place, and if we do plan on really moving towards green energy, I definitely agree. We should be putting that money into the green energy.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts on climate change? Are there any aspects of this that we didn't cover that should be covered now?
I don't think so.
I don't think I remember any particular things.
I don't think so either.
Okay. Well, then I guess we'll wrap. Thank you all for doing this.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
This
it was
was
fun.
this was fun. I thought this was great. I want to do more of these.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to be the same group of people every time, but if any one of you want to come back and do this again, just hit me up.
Yeah.
I would love to. I want it to be a bigger group next time, maybe like 6 people max. I think would be good. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And see you later, guys. Bye, everybody.